All right, so we've gone ahead and we've learned how to do straighter lines, how to draw better lines, and we've gone over some of those concepts. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take those straight lines, that fundamental line, and we're going to turn it into very basic two-dimensional and three-dimensional types of shapes. So first we're going to talk a little bit about drawing circles and to draw rectangles and squares and triangles, how we can draw those better and how to control them a little better. We're going to talk a little bit about handholds for drawing these different types of 2D shapes. But again, they're fundamental. The better you can draw those 2D shapes, the better you can draw intermediate and advanced sorts of things. If I can't take a car and break it down into a cube, or basically a box, because it wouldn't be a cube, it'd be more a box of some sort, the better I can do that, the better my drawing of that truck will be. So again, we're going to go ahead and learn about how to draw these very, very fundamental shapes. Do not discount the importance of learning how to do that. Because again, the better we can do that, the better we can do 3D shapes. The better we can do that, the more we can modify that 3D shape. It is fundamental, and it is something that you need to be practicing at least 3 times a week. In fact, I go over, doing the roughs, the sketching. We'll talk about that in a second. But learn how to draw better fundamental shapes: triangles, circles, and squares. All right, and of course, in this, which squares are rectangles. So we're talking about rectangles and squares. But go ahead and watch the videos. Try to then get out a piece of paper, draw a few of them just to warm up and get your brain wrapped around it, and do the best you can. All right, and hang in there and stay tuned. We're going to talk today about some handholds we're going to be using for the class, and then we're going to talk about using the different handholds to draw different shapes. Basically, our squares, triangles, and rectangles. So we're going to use one of 2 handholds in the class. We're going to use, now I'm a left-handed person, as you can see. So for you right-handed folk, we'll talk to you about how it'll be slightly different for you folk. Well, not different, but the correct hand, as you may think or say or refer to as the hand that I use. But we're going to be using what's called a tripod grip. Now, tripod is between basically 3 points, right? And so we hold it between 3 fingers. And the pencil stays in the crook of the hand. So right here. It can come out, but if it does, it's going to have a little less control. You hold it between your thumb and your index finger, and then it sits on your 3rd finger. Now, I've got my 3rd finger out a little bit further, so that's not very comfortable, so I'm going to pull it back. But I just want you to see that that's how I'm holding it. Now I'm going to correct the grip because this is not quite the way I'd actually hold it. There we go. So I've repositioned my fingers so that it's, again, my middle finger was out a little bit further like this, just so you could see it, but I'm actually pulling it back so I actually put it to where it's comfortable. So again, this is our tripod grip, okay? Now with a tripod grip, sometimes you'll extend the fingers out, still a tripod, it's held between the thumb, the index finger, and sitting on the 3rd finger, and sometimes we'll actually pull it in. So again, all we're doing is we're moving the fingers either out or in. And there's certain times where you actually do a finger swing for value and stuff. But this is a tripod grip. For you left-handed folk like myself, it looks like this. So again, just between the 1st finger, the index finger, and sitting on the 3rd finger. And if you draw with it, usually I'll draw either with my thumb up a little bit and sort of my wrist cocked up just a little bit as far as that goes. Or most times I'll be drawing, if I'm using it to sketch with, I'll actually turn my hand a little bit so my first 2 knuckles are pointing up, and then draw with it that way. The other handhold we'll be using is what's called a baton handhold. So if I went to pick up this pencil between my thumb and my fingers, that's a baton handhold. For the right hand, it looks like this. Again, we're just holding it between all our fingers and our thumb. Okay, and usually you're going to almost always, there's sometimes when you might turn it over, but I've always found that a little strange. But I'll still do it every once in a while. But usually you're drawing with this with your knuckles up. And so again, for us left-handed folk, it looks like this. Now, sometimes, usually I won't have all my fingers on there. Actually, we'll usually have it between the 3 fingers. So I'm still drawing with the same way, it's just I don't have as many fingers on there. The reason why is because this has a little bit more movement, and if I put all the fingers on there, it locks it in. So it really locks it, so you have to move your elbow. We don't really normally use the wrist too much unless we're making value, but we'd have to use our elbow. So yeah, if I want a little more movement with it, I'll take the other two fingers off and just hold it, again like so. Okay, so then again, that's the baton handhold, because you hold it kind of like you're conducting a symphony, like a baton. Same thing between the thumb and all the fingers. And again, usually we're going to be drawing with our knuckles up. Okay. So with this, we're actually going to draw some of the basic shapes, and we'll start with the rectangle. So if I'm going to start with if I'm going to draw a rectangle, you might be like, "What is he doing?" Well, I'm actually I was doing a baton, and I moved my finger a bit back. So you might be like, "What's happening?" And it's because I'm drawing flat. So I'm kind of having to skew my arm a little differently than I normally would, because it's not a good idea to ever draw flat. Or what I don't mean, well, on a different plane. So if I'm drawing with this paper on a table and I'm sitting at the table, my eyes and the table are on two different planes, and so you're drawing in what we call perspective. So we don't want to do that. But whenever I draw a rectangle, it's easier to make the two sets of lines, because a rectangle is two sets of lines that meet at 90 degrees, or what we call a true corner. So it's usually easier to go ahead and draw the first two lines, and then we can go ahead and draw the second two lines. Now in the beginning, and even when I'm drawing rectangles normally, it doesn't matter if you go ahead, we're not worried about if it expands or if it extends beyond the corner, because I can always erase that off. Whenever we draw a rectangle, we want to be able to see very clearly the eyes. Those are the intersection points of the two lines, and we refer to those in drawing as eyes. And those are very important whether we're doing a perspective or some other sort of drawing techniques. We want to be able to see the eyes. Now I was drawing with a baton handhold. Now I've actually changed, because I'm doing smaller stuff. I'm actually changed to sort of a tripod grip that I've extended the fingers out. Again, it's a tripod. And a lot of times I'll switch between the two and not even know I'm doing it, because it's just an old habit. But just to show you, this is a symbol that we use, and of course geometry uses it too. But this is just part of a little square to say, hey, that this is a true corner, or in other words, 90 degrees. For those that have geometry, a 90-degree corner we call perpendicular. And as we get more into intermediate and advanced drawing, we'll use the word perpendicular, which means 90 degrees. Perpendicular. And that just means you've got a true corner, or 90 degrees. And all these corners are supposed to be 90 degrees. So if I had a rectangle, so let's say I drew a rectangle like so, and a rectangle like so, and then we went ahead and did this, and then we did this. Well, even though the lines are fairly straight, this is not 90 degrees, okay? This is, this is beyond 90, and this is less than 90. This is what we'd call a parallelogram. This is not a rectangle. So when we draw rectangles, we're going to try to draw them as nicely as we possibly can, to go ahead and just to get, well, this time I didn't do the two sets of lines, did I? And I have a rectangle that's a little rougher. They're not quite as nice in terms of their angles. So I'm glad I did that, again, because of the fact that it just shows that usually when I do the two lines that are parallel and the other two lines that are parallel, I get a better rectangle. Is this completely unsalvageable? No, but it's not, it just wasn't, it didn't work as well. Again, now I'm using this tripod grip again, and so again I'll switch between the tripod grip a lot of times and the baton handhold for something like a rectangle, for straight lines. So that's for drawing a rectangle. Again, it's easier to draw the two lines that are parallel and then the other two lines that are parallel. And notice how I'm changing. This is actually the baton handhold. And if I'm using a baton handhold or even a tripod, I'll draw these two lines with my pencil pointing up vertically to do horizontal lines. And then when I'm drawing lines that are vertical, I'm using the pencil at a horizontal orientation. So you're always, again, that 90-degree thing is always going on in drawing, whether we're aware of it or not. You draw better lines if you do. If I try to draw this horizontal line like this, I can't, it can sometimes get away from me. So it's easier to draw a horizontal line, or to get used to drawing a horizontal line with your pencil oriented vertically. Okay, and you'll just have an easier time with it. And you can see the tip the entire way, so you don't draw blind. Now, if we're going to draw a circle, I'm going to always use a baton handhold for a circle. And again, we're going to draw with my whole. I'm drawing with my elbow, and I'm drawing even further up here with my shoulder. But I'm not moving my wrist. I won't move my fingers. So when you're drawing circles, we have a natural circular motion through the shoulder and through the elbow. And we're going to use that to draw circles. We're just going to, try to do some concentric circles that use that natural motion that we have through our arm. Now, if I was trying to do this, I might do this for a warm-up. So let's say I wanted a better circle. Let's say you can do what's sort of like when you're batting, stepping up to bat, and you swing through, with your bat a couple times, imagining the ball and hitting the ball. You can do the same thing with that, where you hover over the area you're going to make a circle, and then when you feel like it's really circular, again, I'm using baton handhold, well, then you can go ahead and put your pencil down. And this is just a start. If I then drew that, I can say, well, look, I got two lines. Well, this went a little flat, so we open that up. This is extending outside, so we could go ahead and then go, well, I'm going to use this line is much closer. That looks like a very nice arc, So even if you go down around, 2 or 3 times, you can pick the lines that are going to help this circle. Again, I'm using a baton handhold. No, sorry, not baton, a tripod. I'll multitask well sometimes, so if I say something that seems to contradict what I first said, and in the video we'll try to point out the exact terms so that there's no confusion. But again, tripod, baton, tripod, baton. All right, so we have one more shape. We have rectangles. And of course, if in the rectangle family, we also have squares, right? So I could go ahead and I could say, well, if it's a square, which is basically just a rectangle that is as tall as it is wide, so we'd have to, well, let's make it, I think we're really close to the bottom, so let's go ahead and make this a little slimmer so that way I can pull it this way. But again, the square should be as tall as it is wide. I think this is a little short, but that's a little better. And again, sometimes it's hard to judge exactly when you're drawing in perspective, and that just means that my eyes, I'm sitting at a table, and so my eyes looking down are at an angle, and then the table is flat, and so they're not on the same plane. If I had a plane, I would want my eye to be at a 90-degree angle, so that way the plane, is correctly oriented to my eyes. If I'm looking down like this and this is flat, see how that's not hitting it at 90 degrees? And so again, what you've got is you've got distortion and perspective happening. Whereas that's why people will draw with drafting tables, and they'll have the drafting tables at an angle, and they'll get it to the same angle that it's at your eye, or not the same angle as the eye, pardon me, perpendicular to the eye, and that basically means that, this plane here and that plane there would then be the same. So you're just going to want to, we'll actually have people starting to draw on an angle so that we can get better, don't draw in perspective, and that way we don't have distortion and we can judge our rectangles and circles better. Now when we're drawing a triangle, and again I'm using a baton handhold for drawing this triangle, the hardest part of drawing a triangle is getting the angles the same. This side the same as that side. That's the hardest part to do with a triangle. And so there's a very quick method to help us. Now, when we first start, it can seem kind of strange, but once you get used to it, it's not that big a deal. If we actually bring a line down, and this line hits this line at a true corner, or 90 degrees, well, then I can see what it lets me see very easily is if this distance here is the same as this distance here. And it should be. We're looking for a triangle that has the equal distance from this point that's from a line that comes down and meets this line at 90 degrees. We should have the same distance. If we don't have the same distance, then we have something that's not what's called symmetrical. It's not even. And so what I could do is I could take my thumb and the end of the pencil and I could take a measurement. So I'm measuring from my thumb out to here, and then come from this point, line my thumb up there, and then the tip of the pencil. And the tip of the pencil comes out about this far, which means that this point here is the same distance as that point. And then what we do is I just bring this line straight out and bring that dot onto the line. Doesn't help if it's hovering above it. But where this line and that little dot I made, that's going to be where I need to bring this side down. And if I've measured it correctly, then we should have a triangle that's much more what we call symmetrical or mirrored or the same on both sides. That's actually flaring out just a tiny bit. But now we have a much better triangle, right to left. And so sometimes people will see this and they'll go like, man, that looks like, what are you doing? You throwing geometry at us? Or what is this, a drafting class? Well, a big part of drawing is draftsmanship. And geometry is mathematics of three-dimensional space. What are we as artists dealing with? We're dealing with three-dimensional space. So there's quite a bit of overlap. Now we're going to approach it very, very simply. We're going to use some basic ideas from geometry, but as I see it, the geometry folks, they stole it from us. We already had these ideas and they came along and they sucked all the joy out of it. So we're going to use just a few concepts from geometry to help our drawing and our draftsmanship be better. Draftsmanship is how well are you taking care of 90-degree angles and how symmetrical is stuff and how good are those circles and things like that. But, the first part is that we're just, the triangle is just three lines, and mostly we're going to be dealing with triangles that are symmetrical. Now, we could, of course, just practice doing, you could do some triangles that are, this is asymmetrical, meaning it's not mirrored. But if we're trying to do a symmetrical triangle, once again, we could bring this down here, cut at 90 degrees, cut this in half, and look how this is not even close to being the same. That's why it's, asymmetrical. So again, we could take this distance, and if I really wanted to, I could take and use a spare piece of paper like so, and I could say, okay, I'll take this little, not all that little, won't we? This is just not tearing the way I want it to. There we go. Let's just go ahead and say I said, all right, well, I got this spare piece of paper. If we wanted to really get, if we were really trying to do a really nice drawing, and this triangle really mattered. I mean, I did a guesstimation, but my guesstimation was off. Whereas this is going to get, and I didn't even measure it. If I'd measured with my thumb, that'd be closer. But this little one where we take and we tick off the mark of how far it is out, what's the center, then we line it back up, what's the center, how far out is it? If we do that, that will be, as close to being the exact same as you could possibly get. And when it really counts, why wouldn't I do something like that? So anyways, we're going to go ahead and, be drawing a lot of, rectangles, triangles, circles, and we're going to talk about turning them into three-dimensional shapes. And so we'll talk more about that in a bit.